Okay, good morning. Oh, sorry. Oh, that's fine. Good morning. Again, my name is Terry Barber. I'm the Director for the Public Health and Community Development Department. I've been asked to come here today to give a brief presentation and update on the revisions to the county's land development manual. So today during my presentation I want to touch just a little bit on what a land development is, why that is relevant to our discussion today, and where we're at in the process of making those revisions. So what is a land development manual? The county has blueprints for development. We have a general plan and zoning ordinances which essentially guide the type and density of development that occurs in the county. The land development manual is the technical specs or documents that guide how that work's going to be done. What's the road standard, how is it going to be built, how much road base, those kinds of technical aspects of development that occurs in the county. The existing land development manual was adopted in 1975, so that's the last time that that document was revised. Not to say that that is what is being implemented or practiced, but that is actually the last time it was revised. So the land development manual revision, the goal was to integrate current practices as well as update the new regulatory requirements for development. It went through a revision to reorganize the topics and make the development standards known up front of development. That's been a problem. And rewrite and clarify different standards to make them easier to implement and enforce. So the land development manual, what would trigger that? Who would it apply to? So basically, and again, I want to stress that this is a draft document that is working its way through the regulatory process. It has not been adopted as of yet. So it would apply to all discretionary residential land development applications, so nothing existing. It would be discretionary land development projects that were deployed after the adoption of the document. It would apply to all commercial and industrial projects, whether or not they were discretionary, so both discretionary as well as ministerial, and any non-ag, non-timber project where there was less than or more than 1 acre of disturbance. So as part of the process, and the reason I'm here today is to talk about when the Water Board went through this process, they asked the county to look at its grading and or development standards and how we were implementing and putting controls and protective measures into our development practices. So the land development manual, the draft document, does require a grading plan for the applicable projects. It prohibits grading, including site prep, without county approvals, and requires compliance with state and federal discharge requirements. It requires developers for discretionary projects and those that it would apply or be triggered by the land development manual requirements to submit geotechnical and engineering reports to talk about or address cuts, fills, slope designs, revegetation, and those types of things that are typically done with development projects even today. Oh. So the grading plan calls for both erosion control requirements or plans as well as drainage control plans. The objective of the grading or the erosion control plan would be to provide and document engineering best management practice to control surface runoff and erosion, retain sediment, and prevent discharge to drainage systems during pre-construction and construction development periods. For projects with greater than an acre of disturbance, it would require a SWIP, which is a current regulatory requirement. For those requiring or producing less than an acre, the developer would document adequate erosion control and sediment control measures to the satisfaction of the county, and we would measure that against the Caltrans Water Pollution Control Manual document that would guide those standards. The drainage control requirements would ensure that there were adequate control measures to prevent erosion during and after construction. So those plans and technical documents would address terrace drains, V-channels and slopes, alignments, wetland and riparian protections, and those types of things. So where have we been and where are we at in the process? The county started this process in 2004. They hired a private contractor to essentially facilitate a process where the agencies involved in development come together, looked at the new practices, their models in other counties, and identified existing practices that were already being done to incorporate them into the revised land development manual. In 2006, that document was released to the public. There was extensive public outreach. The agencies or the county solicited comments from the public, local engineers, state, federal, and local stakeholders and entities. The process was temporarily interrupted, or we lost a little bit of momentum in 2006 when the planning director position was vacated. We quickly picked that back up. Workshops were done before the Planning Commission and Board of Supervisors in late 2006, October and November 06. 2007, the revisions from that public comment period were incorporated into a revised document. At this point, the county hit a little bit of a progress was a bit slow due to multiple reorgs and changes in staff. For example, the planning department was made part of a multi-department reorganization that ultimately ended up creating the Public Health and Community Development Department. We had a planning director in 2007 that lasted less than a year. Public Works went through a major reorganization. We had a change of county council, and again reestablished another planning director. So I mentioned that to say that the key stakeholders, the persons or the leadership that were important to moving this document forward, there was a lot of changeover and interruption in the leadership. However, in 2009, late 2009, those folks regrouped. The leadership committed to moving the project forward. A new cast of characters with new ideas and concepts and philosophies on how this all worked. We're committed to that. We got in the room and ended up with a revise to that document. You might expect that there were some fairly significant or major changes or revisions to that process or to that rewrite. Those concepts were introduced to the Planning Commission in May of 2010 at a workshop. We proceeded along in holding a public hearing in September in the latter part of 2010 in which public comment was received. January of this year, the Planning Commission again held a public hearing, and staff, or the Planning Department staff, embarked upon the negative declaration or doing the CEQA review for the project. 2011, in March, the Planning Commission acted on the negative declaration, and at this point the public hearing has been continued while Council is completing its review, and we're continuing up on the adoption process or the regulatory process. So in conclusion, or the take-home message is that the land development, the draft, continues to move forward towards final adoption. You certainly could criticize us for a very long and convoluted and bureaucratic process, but it has not been a lack of effort that the county isn't addressing those development concerns and issues. Grading and erosion control are only one small component of the land development manual. Again, it contains a lot of other technical guidance, and grading and erosion control seems to be not as controversial as some of the other aspects of the project. So while we have not adopted a land development manual, one should not conclude that projects are exempt from development controls and protective measures. I've heard a lot from you all today. Those of you who are doing development know that there are certainly a heavy burden of bureaucratic and regulatory rules placed upon developers today. So The reason that I believe that the erosion control and the grading issues are not highly controversial is that they are nearly equivalent to what's being proposed in the Land Development Manual. It's a culmination of the practices that are already being employed during existing land development or development projects in the county. The Land Development Manual will just seek to consolidate and formalize those into an updated document. So that concludes my presentation.
Now it's Sari's turn. Do you want to? Oh, do you want questions? Okay. Sorry. Felice? Can you turn on the lights?
They would be common, and today we would see those showing up in Siskiyou documents that are associated, that are already required under the California Environmental Quality Act as projects go through. We would see those in the form of project redesigns or in mitigations that might show up through the approval process. Yes.
Does this plan negate the need or the necessity for a county regrading ordinance? We don't have an ordinance in this county.
The county does not have a grading ordinance. This document would require a grading plan for specific projects, but not all. So it would be it would only apply to those that would trigger the Land Development Manual. So the discretionary projects or commercial, and then non-ag, non-timber greater than an acre. So if you had a current or a existing piece of property that you were developing that didn't trigger the Land Development Manual, the grading ordinance would not apply under the current scheme. If it would trigger a permit or if it would apply to any of those, yes.
Okay, so Forest Service, whoever.
Typically don't get involved in the permitting on Forest Service land. So if it is a permit or a project that would trigger that, yes. So it would depend on the project. If the county rules would apply to them for this project, no. But there are some that do not. Yes. Yes. Yes.
So when these guys go all out camp,
the county does have another use permit process for removal of large quantities of earthen material.
Thank you very much, Terry.